Okay, so we have one more little chunk of oxidation reactions, and these are actually oxidations of thiols. These are completely different than oxidations of alcohols. So when we oxidize a thiol, what actually happens is instead of making more carbon sulfur bonds, we actually make a sulfur sulfur bond. So what this looks like is we'll have a bond in between two different molecules. So two molecules will come together and bond to one another. So we'll have a sulfur and a sulfur bond. Let's do pink, why not? Let's draw in those carbon chains that were attached. So we form a bond between each of the two sulfurs. And these are called disulfide bonds. So oxidizing a sulfur or a thiol is very different. We also release H2. I forgot to write that. So those hydrogens on those sulfurs are going to be released. So we're still oxidizing, we're still losing hydrogen, H2, but it's in a different way. We are not going to break the carbon hydrogen bonds to make another carbon sulfur bond. We're going to just make two carbon sulfur or a carbon sulfur sulfur bond without messing with the carbons. These disulfide bonds are super common in proteins. So specifically the amino acid cysteine. So we'll talk more about amino acids when we get to the proteins chapter in our book. But this particular amino acid called cysteine, I spelled that wrong. Knew I would do that. Cysteine has a sulfur in its amino acid right here. And this is how hair gets its curl. So a lot of hair, or if your hair has a lot of cysteine, so your DNA codes your proteins in your hair to have a lot of cysteine in it, then you'll have a lot of bonds in between different parts of them. So if you have the nice long chain, you'll have a bond in between two different parts, and that's what gives you a curly look, is because you have the proteins actually folded instead of straight. So this is actually how a perm works. So those of you who had parents in the 80s that liked perms and all that fun stuff, how a perm works is you reduce your hair, so you break all of the disulfide bonds, and then you put your curlers in, and then you put an oxidant in your hair and reform all of those sulfur-sulfur bonds. And then, so it reforms the hair in the curl that you want. So you're actually doing a covalent modification on your hair, on the protein on your hair. Okay, so let's do just a couple practice problems with these. Predict the product of the following reactions. So we have, we have oxidation of thiol. So we're going to draw a sulfur-sulfur bond and then have that same carbon chain on both of the sulfurs. So in this case, we have an isopropyl group. Okay, and then again, we have our thiol that's being oxidized. We're going to have not an oxidant, a sulfur, sulfur bond, and then draw the same carbon chain on both. In this case, the cyclohexyl. A lot more simple than oxidations of alcohols, but it is important to know that these are different for sure. Okay, I think that's all on oxidations of thiol. See you guys in the next video.